Yes.
It's so good to have Jeremy here with me this morning. We're going to talk about entropy and how that seems to fit into not only the physical world, but into the social world as well. So I'm looking forward to this. Jeremy, you commented on one of the earlier videos that I did on entropy in reference to computation and Wolfram's theory. And we decided it would be a good topic to talk about. So I'm going to put the ball in your court and let you start with your idea, and then we'll jump off from there.
Well, I don't know. It would kind of, for my comment to make sense, it would kind of require for you to lay out a little bit of what you laid out in the solo video where you were talking about this idea, because mine is definitely a response to that. So do you want me to summarize what I think you said, or would you like to do that first?
Well, that would be interesting, because I got a comment. I actually got an email from one of my longtime viewers the other day, who I've corresponded with in the past, trying to convince her to come and be on the show, but she won't do it. So anyway, she has my email address. So she emailed me and she said, "You keep talking about your project. What exactly is your project?" And I thought, you've watched every video I've done for the last 2 years, and somehow I have not made it clear what my project is. That made me feel really bad. So maybe if you tell me what you got out of that video, then I'll know whether or not what I'm saying is getting across to people.
Oh, wow. Oh, now you've put a lot more pressure on me because you want me to explain your whole project, which I don't know.
No. You don't have to explain the project. Okay. Just what you got from that one brief video. What it was that stirred you to comment.
Okay. So it took me a minute to parse what you were saying, because you were using different terminology than I would use or that I'm familiar with. But once I think I understood what you were saying basically that computational reducibility is a good thing because it allows us to deal with the world. I would frame that a little differently. I would say that I do agree that our brains are prediction engines. But I would say that we use fractals to condense the world in a way that we can process, because we have limited computational abilities, right?
Computationally bounded, as Wolfram
would
say. Yeah.
Yes. So when you throw a ball, you're not doing calculus to figure out how to catch it. You're doing rough approximations of calculus enough to know how much energy to apply to your arm to lift it up and catch the ball, right? But we don't have to go into the particulars. You don't have to show your work, so to speak, in order to catch a ball, because a lot of these things are happening subconsciously. We're not aware of it. We're not aware of all the computation we're doing. But as I understood what you were saying, is that you were saying that the world is what we're trying to do is make predictions of the world, and as we make good decisions, we are reducing the variability of our future. Basically, we're reducing variance, and you classified that as good. And if we make decisions that increase our variance, you classified those as bad, and because it makes things less predictable. Now, I would agree with you that you could judge the stability or the health, you could say, of a society by how long you can plan your activities in said society out into the future. Like I know my ever since I've lived in this house, trash day has been on the same day, unless there's a holiday on Monday, which moves it a day, but then it's the next day. And that's been predictable, and I can make this predictable. And that's a sign that I live in a pretty stable society, right? My trash day is every day. My bill is due the same day of the month every month, right? There's a lot of signs that our culture is very stable. And that is it. But when you classified it as good and bad, I that's not where I didn't take an issue with that, but I did say that I think it revealed your innate conservative wiring. And I would say that most people
let me say
are conservative.
let me say
Okay.
first before you go on with that,
Yeah.
yes, I probably do have some conservative wiring left over from my past history when I was much more ideological.
Hmm.
But even before I ran into Jordan Peterson, I had begun to ditch ideology and try
Hmm.
to reframe the way that I looked at the world.
Yes.
And
And I didn't mean
and
politically conservative.
oh, right,
I'm
I
not
know,
meaning politically conservative.
right.
Anyway, go ahead.
I just want
Go ahead.
to riff on the reply that I made to your comment was I didn't realize I had framed it that way in the video with good and bad. And the
Hmm.
minute you brought it up, I went, oh my gosh, of course I know this. And if we just look at it through Peterson's framework, um, there's a good and a bad side to order, and there's a good and a bad side to chaos,
Yes.
right?
Yes. Yes.
And
Yes.
so,
Yes.
so I mean, that's the bottom line. And I just need to train myself to think that way in every situation, not just be inexplicit with my language.
Mm.
So I was glad you brought it up to me, and I'm glad we get to talk about this because
Oh, good.
it did make you think about the whole way in which our society today, both the predictability and the unpredictability, are triggering both sides of the political spectrum.
Yes. Yes. So that's kind of what I was going to say, is that you, how do I put this? I'm trying to get back into what I was, oh yes. Okay. So when you are in a system, and that system is predictable, and the predictable system has favorable outcomes for you, it's natural that you would want to conserve said system. What
Mhm.
I think we're seeing is that the system, a lot of the younger people especially, feel that the system has been rigged against them. If you look at student loans that cannot be, they've been told you have to get a college degree to participate in our society, but in order to get a college degree, you end up taking onerous loans with very little promise that you will even be able to pay back the loan, and you cannot claim bankruptcy on said loan, right?
Mhm.
And then on top of that, you layer home ownership, right? So between student loans and home ownership, a lot of people under the age of 35 don't feel like they have an adequate opportunity to participate in said society, and they feel, because of that, they feel this isn't a system I want to maintain. This isn't a system that I agree with the outcomes of, because I'm not benefiting from the outcomes of this stable system. I'm being prevented from participating in that system.
Mhm.
So I want to wreck it. Right? I want to disrupt it. Right? Like the
Mhm.
phraseology that leftists use, that, and I don't mean that politically, but I'm saying the Marxists use, that's a more accurate way of saying it, is to disrupt and dismantle. That's what they want to do. Their whole goal is to disrupt and dismantle the current system, because they see it as oppressive, right?
Well,
And
and
so,
they also feel that if they can disrupt a system, they can promise that a better system in a neat little package, a neat little utopian package, will arrive if they destroy the old system. They don't want
yes,
to work incrementally. They just want to take the whole thing down and then bring in their new thing and lay it on top.
right, but they don't really know what that looks like or how it will work. You can't pin them down on that. They don't
Mhm.
know. They only know that this current system is oppressive and needs to be disrupted and dismantled, right?
Mhm.
So, and that's part of the danger, and that's why a lot of us are saying, wow, this is really dangerous and difficult, because they only want to destroy it with no real plan on what to rebuild or what it will look like afterward, until some unspecified amount of time of awful dictatorship and tyranny in the meantime. And we've
Well,
already seen in history how that plays out.
the other weird thing that we see happening right now, though, is that that has been the paradigm for quite a long time. Actually, back in the late 60s, when there was all this kerfluffle going on, it was the same paradigm then.
Mm-hmm.
Because I remember my dad, I was in college at the time, and I was hanging out with a bunch of those kind of people. I wasn't actively involved in the tearing down myself, but I knew that crowd. I was familiar with them.
Sure.
And my father was always saying, these people just want to tear things down and they have nothing to replace it with. And so,
Yeah, that's
yes,
correct.
we've had this same paradigm for a long time. But
Yeah.
the weird thing that's happening now is that the same people that have felt that way for a long time are now saying, wait, I don't feel safe with all this instability. But
Mhm.
but the instability they don't feel safe with is a different kind of instability. You know, there's you make me feel unsafe when you say certain things, or when you trigger certain thoughts in my mind, that's making me feel unsafe, and I need to have a safe place. So on many different levels, there's a different animating spirit operating, but all on that same side. But then if you go over here on the right side of the spectrum, there are people who've been saying, you know, we want to conserve, we want to maintain what we have, and we don't feel safe with this instability that's happening right now. I know people that are deeply anxious because of whenever one of these situations comes up where there's a lot of violence or looting, like in California here, we've had a lot of looting this week, and people out with guns and everything. And that makes, even though maybe the probability is very, very low that any of us would ever be touched by it, it still makes us avoid going to shopping malls and avoid going to urban areas, because who knows if it might happen then. And so there's a lot of anxiety going on. So there's anxiety on both sides, and all having to do with this idea of unpredictability, right?
Yes. Yeah. I think this is my armchair philosophy here. And just as a disclaimer, if people don't know who I am, I'm a retard. I'm like, I barely graduated from high school, and I just read too much. That's it. But I don't understand half of what I read, and the other half I misunderstand. So
well, all they have to do is go back and look at some of my previous videos with you to know that while you may look at yourself that way, the rest of us don't see you that way.
Well, I just want a proper disclaimer that I don't have any.
You're not
letters
claiming
after
any
my
expertise.
name. No, I don't have any expertise or authority. I'm just a guy who reads a lot, but this is my own take on that, and that is the idea that. And now I lost my train of thought because I got so caught up in undermining my own credibility, which is good because I don't have it.
We were talking about unpredictability and how that makes people feel unsafe, and the anxiety levels. And
okay. So this, to me, this ties into how Christianity has basically all but died in America. You know, it's largely suffering and is largely just a walking corpse. And as a result of that, you have this existential nihilism. There's the dread that so many people feel. They only feel, oh, my life is meaningless. I'm just a particle in a universe that doesn't care whether I live or die. There's no meaning to their lives. There's no purpose to their lives. And this ties in what I think your whole project is, which is to, how do we resurrect this meaning? How do we resurrect meaning and make it the primary focus of our life? Right? How do we find meaning? How do we define meaning? And how do we participate in meaning? Right? Because to me, it's one thing to know it, it's another thing to participate in it. And only by participating can we actually be healed. And so anyway, because people don't have that, they have pursued hedonism, and we've pretty much played that out. Right? Like hedonism has largely, like, people don't feel anything anymore. They feel numb. They've completely just already gone through all of the passions, and now they go, what's left? And they don't have an answer, and they're terrified of dying in this state. And I think that's what feeds their anxiety, is this being terrified of death and being terrified of nihilism. You know, they face the dread and they don't know how to answer it. And that's what feeds this anxiety. That, to me, that's what's really feeding it in our culture.
Yeah. and wow, there's just so many things underneath that. Oh my gosh.
I know. This is tough. It's
This
tough to talk about.
gigantic hierarchy just builds itself on top of my head, and I can't get
Yeah.
back.
Right. Well, you know
I
what?
was gonna one little.
Oh, go
I'll
ahead.
just say one little thing the thing
Sure.
that popped into my head, which has many caveats and it has many threads, and so I'm not going to try to do all the caveats. I'm just going to say what popped into my head is that some of the people that I know that are having this deep anxiety are actually very deep, committed Christian people who have this anxiety,
Mm-hmm.
and the stated reasons for their anxiety is that they thought that our nation was one kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
They thought that there was freedom here and a future, and that it was a system of laws and principles. And some of these people are immigrants who came here for a better life because they thought that this was going to be a place of freedom and safety. And then they find that the authorities are no longer protecting people on the streets,
Mm-hmm.
no longer responding to calls for help.
Right.
And then they're thinking, how do I protect my family in a society where the government and the policing and the administrative apparatus is not there for us,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
And so that's building in this kind of deep level of kind of underlying daily pressure of how do I navigate this new world? I thought I was living in one kind of a world that was stable and had a secure hierarchy of order. And
Mm-hmm.
now I'm living in this world that does not have that stable, secure hierarchy of order.
Yes, I would agree with that. And I think this has, I mean, like everything, I think it has positive and negative side effects. I think I'll start with the negative. Obviously, you know, we've talked about a lot of the negative side effects already. People feeling this anxiety, people feeling like they have to take more responsibility for their personal safety than they felt in the past because they don't feel that they can trust the structure that they have. You know, basically we've outsourced physical violence. We've raised it up a level beyond vigilantism and mob rule, up a level to, you know, police and to other law enforcement agencies. And a lot of people are feeling that that's inadequate and that that's not working properly. And so now it's going back down to where people are starting to feel more of a responsibility. Well, that leads to more chaos. That leads more to,
Yeah.
because you have people who aren't trained, you have people who aren't familiar, people who don't practice, people who don't haven't thought these things through. They haven't trained on how to respond properly to violence or threats of violence, and so you get people
And
reacting on their natural instincts.
Yeah, people who are driven by fear too.
Yeah, exactly.
Right,
on both
because
sides.
if you bring it up a level, then there are people who are professionally trained to manage their fears and to
Yes.
operate courageously in difficult situations and so forth. But you bring it
Right.
back down a level, people are only protecting themselves because they're protecting themselves out of fear.
Yes.
And that's not a good place to function from.
Right. Yeah, because you make mistakes. When you're afraid, when you're anxious, your brain falls apart. Your IQ like literally splits in half. Like you don't have the you don't have the ability to think clearly in those kinds of situations. And then, but the positive benefit, I think we can't ignore that people have largely they offloaded their personal safety responsibilities. They also offloaded their responsibility for participating in our political system, because our political system is one that expects citizens to participate. And if you don't, someone else who doesn't share your value system will. And that's what's happened. There's been a concerted effort over a very long period of time by a group of people who want to undermine and destroy, disrupt, and dismantle the system, to take positions of authority and positions of power in our structure and fundamentally undermine the principles of governance that govern that, you know, because our country and our government is built on certain assumptions and a certain value system and a certain assumption of a shared value system. And when you get people who come into that structure without that shared value system, they can do enormous damage. When you get a prosecutor who can choose to prosecute and not prosecute whatever case they want, choose to which charges to bring, whatever not, and choose bail and not, and whether to charge bail and not, and sentencing and not, that's a lot of power to give to somebody. And if you don't share a value system with them, they can cause a lot of disruption, right? And that's what we're seeing. And we're seeing that at every level.
A very simple example of that is how San Francisco changed their rules. So anything stolen that's under $1,000 was changed from a felony to a misdemeanor.
Right.
And as a result, store owners don't get any satisfaction at all, even if they can manage to identify the perpetrator and find them and have them charged. It's a misdemeanor. They're back out on the street. They're doing it again. So many of the store owners have just stopped even bringing charges. And over the last couple of years, that has exacerbated to the point where people just walk into a store, they pile up a bunch of stuff. As long as they're under $1,000, they walk out the front door and nobody can really do anything about it.
Right.
And that's, one of the things I noticed years ago that I thought was such a blessing about this nation is that you could walk down the street on a Saturday and stores would put their racks of items out on the street and you could kind of shop and look, and as you go along, and it was all based on this complete system of trust.
Yes.
That I can trust you that I'm going to put these things out here and you're going to pay for them. Right?
Yes.
That's gone.
Right.
And how does a society function without trust?
Well, you get black markets and corruption is what happens.
Yeah.
That's what takes its place, right? And you get private security forces, you get corruption, and you get black markets, and you get bribery. That's just, when you get pulled over in some countries, the police comes to you, and you just say, hey, is there any way I can pay my fine? Yes, okay, I was speeding. Can I just pay my fine here? You say to the police officer, I've got 40 American dollars in my pocket. Can I just pay my fine? Yes. Off you go. That's what happens, right? If you can't trust the system, it has to move down a level. That's what happens, right? If the hierarchy is not serving the needs of those that it serves, they have to take that responsibility back and start doing it on a personal level, right?
And the lack of that level of corruption is what has always differentiated the US from a lot of other countries.
Yes.
That we didn't function on bribery.
Right.
I remember seeing the difference of that so clearly when I lived in Haiti for a bit of time, and there everything was, you got to have money on you because, well, for one thing, when you went from border to border between any city, they would check your papers.
Yeah.
Even if you were a citizen, they checked your papers.
Yeah.
And you had to have money because otherwise you weren't going to get through. And that money wasn't going to the government. It was going to the guy that was holding the AK-47, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And
so you get all these little tyrannies, right? You get all these little tyrannies that pop up when the system becomes too corrupt or too inadequate or too unwilling to address the needs of the people. You get all these little tyrannies that pop up it's all bottom up. Bottom up takes over, right? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but
no, I was going to go on one more little rant.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
There's this restaurant that we've gone to for years because we have this discount book called the Passport Card. And the Passport Card allows you to go to certain restaurants and buy one meal and get the second meal free. Mm-hmm. So this happens to be a nice restaurant that's frequented by a lot of business people during the week. But on the weekends, they don't get a lot of business because it's in a business park and it's not a walk-by thing. So you can use the Passport Card on the weekends. And so we like to go there on the weekends and have a steak, get 2 steaks for the price of one. How can you beat that, right?
Right, great.
It's in a business park, beautiful place, big parking lot. And over the last few years, the sign has gotten bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Don't leave anything in your car. Make sure your car is locked. Don't leave anything visible. Because now they have almost one a night of cars getting broken into.
Right.
And they hired they hired private security. The private security, what are they going to do? So the last time we were there, we got there, there was another car in the parking lot, and they were standing there waiting for the police to come, and their windshield was all over the sidewalk. It was still light out. These people had gone into the restaurant, and the husband had just happened to come back out 5 minutes later to get something out of his car. And in those 5 minutes, these guys had jumped that car, smashed and grabbed smashed the window, grabbed everything out of the trunk, and off they went. And they're waiting for the police to come. They'd been waiting for half an hour. The police still hadn't come.
Yeah.
And who knows if the police ever came. And
Right.
What is a private security guy going to do if somebody comes and smashes the car? He's
Yeah.
a private security guy. He's not going to take out his gun and threaten,
Right.
Are you
Right.
gonna give up your life for your $25 an hour that you're getting as a private security guy,
Right. 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 Well, and you don't, especially with the very tenuous laws that are in place as far as, self-defense or what, I mean, it's just, that's a huge controversy right now. Right.
Yeah.
So people are even more hesitant to take that responsibility in the face of spending the rest of their life in prison.
So pretty soon people are just going to start staying home.
Right.
And then what happens to the economy when people don't go to the malls and they don't go to the restaurants? Then we have COVID all over again.
So I think that's part of the intent.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
part of the intent. So this ties to me, this ties into, I heard just another part of the video that you posted today. I just listened to a part of it, where you were playing with the ideas of authority and obedience. Right. And I think this ties into it. And I think the missing component that kind of ties those ideas together is identity. Right. So identity, if you have so let's say if you have what's a good example? Okay, so if you have a basketball team and you are going to, and your goal as a basketball team is to win the state championship, you have an identity and you take on a name. You all wear the same colors, right? So you take on a uniform identity, so you all look similar. When you're younger, you don't have a name on your shirt; you just have a number. And you're part of this team, and the coach is the authority for the team, but the coach sometimes is the identity of the team, but often there's like a team captain who's the exemplar of, this is what we all want to embody. This is the person who we want to model and emulate. Well, so the authority of the coach is to say, these are the things that you're allowed to do. These are the things you're expected to do. And these are the things that you're not allowed to do. And these are the things that you can't do if you're going to be on this team and help us win, right? So they have a purpose. They have, and they also have an identity. And when you have an identity, you instantly get things that are inside the identity, and you have things that are outside the identity, right? And things that are cohesive with the identity and things that undermine the identity. And so anything that would lead you, any kind of behavior that would lead you to winning a championship is good or moves you toward that purpose. And anything that's not is a distraction or a demon, right? Like that's another word for demons and distraction. Those are interchangeable. So if you go, if someone on the team on Friday night goes out with their friends and everybody's drinking and you're not allowed to drink, and then if you're going to be on the team, you can't drink, and these other people who are at the party, you go there, you want to be with your friends, that's a distraction from the goal, right? So these demons draw you away from your purpose, and you go to the party, and the coach, who is the authority, who is the judge of what is the identity and what is not, what is on the team, what is not, tells you can't play in the game tomorrow because there are some people who saw you at that party, and I told you that can't be part of this team. Right? So people think there's a lot of people who conflate that with tyranny. And the people that we're seeing uprising right now, the reason is because we live in a very advanced, sophisticated culture, very sophisticated society. And it requires a lot of basic understanding just to function in it. I mean, we put our kids through 12 years of school just to get a basic education of being able to function in this society, right? And then we've imposed minimum wage laws. So now you have to have a minimum amount of value that you can provide to your employer before they can legally hire you. You can't negotiate that anymore. That bar has been raised, right? So if you can't provide $15 an hour plus your, plus your burden for your taxes and the overhead that your company has to pay for you, they can't use you. Well, now you've just raised the bar of how many people can participate. So what happens is we have an identity, we had a unifying vision, and it's usually personified, it's usually rolled into a person. And for a long time, that was Lincoln. It was Washington and Lincoln, right? And Christopher Columbus. You had Washington's birthday we celebrated separately from Lincoln's birthday. Well, part of this undermining was they conflated those and it became President's Day. And now they're tearing down statues of Lincoln because he was what unified the United States. Before Lincoln, it wasn't United States. It was a bunch of loosely associated states. When he unified them, made it the United States, and that's what we stood for. We're anti-slavery, we're equal rights. That's what unified people. But we've raised the level of participation, the level of what you can contribute so high that we have a very large body of people who don't feel that they can participate in that anymore. And they're upset and they're dismayed. And so they're disrupting it. That's where the whole, the strategy, there was a viral video that went around like a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, where people would go into a grocery store and just lick the ice cream and put it back, right? All these little things are to undermine the assumptions, right? To show you, hey, this is very tenuous and we can wreck it any time. Well, they're right. It is. We have a very high level of trust, and it can be undermined at any time very easily if we don't figure out how to lower the bar required for people to participate in the identity of the United States. And if we don't, it's going to balkanize. That's my prediction.
So do you have a thought about what that would look like, lowering that bar?
Yeah, we all become Christians.
Do you think I guess here's my question. Do you think it's strictly economic?
No.
Okay.
No, I don't think it's strictly economic. I think that's just one aspect. I think it's economic. But it's also, we have an undermining, this all goes into undermining Christianity, right? I mean, the first people who came to America were all Christians who wanted to come here and build a Christian utopia. When it all succeeded or failed to various degrees, largely failed, right? To build these little utopias.
Well, I mean, basically what they wanted was the freedom to build what they wanted and not to be hindered from that by the government.
Correct. Right. Yeah. Which is where, the First Amendment comes in, the freedom expression of your religion. Well, the problem is because of materialism and scientism, that's been so undermined, that vision, and it's been replaced with nihilism, that people don't have a unifying identity, and it was Christianity. Even if it wasn't Christianity explicitly, it was implied Christianity of Western civilization, classical liberalism. Those are the principles of Christianity. They were just given a different title.
Before you go on, I just got to say this. I had this thought, and before I forget, before I lose it, I want to say it. It just occurred to me that when I was growing up, because I did not grow up in a Christian home, the kind of unifying vision that I remember around me through all the TV shows and the way that people talked and everything was a chicken in every pot. Everybody's got their little house. It was a picture of having your picket fence around your little cottage and having your family and raising your family my family wasn't like this, but the picture was a loving environment, right? That was the ideal.
Right.
And it was really all very materialistic, not the kind of materialism we think of now of everybody being rich and being on Instagram, but it was still materialistic. It was still completely. And that was actually a move away from the previous thing that had kept the country together, was a focus on the American ideals of freedom and caring for one another, and innovation and creativity, not just towards technology and materialism, but towards building a better society. Kind of, we had a unifying vision as a nation, I think. And coming out of the Second World War, that was up until Korean War started in the 50s. I think that unifying vision coming out of the Second World War was, as a nation, we can accomplish things together that we couldn't accomplish without each other. And so that was very unifying. It was the same kind of thing arose after 9/11. You know, the whole nation kind of pulls together around this idea that together with our vision, we can accomplish things. But that vision has just, over my lifetime, I remember seeing this in 1980 when I first got involved in politics. I noticed that it was starting to disintegrate. And then I lived in Japan from 86 to 89. And just in those 3 years while I was gone, not watching the news, I saw it go from here down to here. And then since then, it's just like on this constant downward slide. We've lost any sort of a unifying vision as a nation.
Yes.
Part of that is losing our unified language.
Yes.
A lot of that is losing our unified trust in God.
Yes.
And it wasn't always that it had to be the Christian God before, because we had the Judeo-Christian ethic and the idea that prayer in the schools, you're just acknowledging the idea that there is a God who gave us all this wondrous world that we live in, and let's be thankful. And even that was taken away. So anyway, that's all to say that I remember seeing this happen. It's a tough place to be in when you can remember what it was like before, and then you see the way it is now. And I think about my daughter who's 27 and how I wanted so much for her to be able to have that vision of what that other world looked like, that I tried to bring her up with that vision of that other world. But that actually put her in a situation where she was very much at risk, because she didn't know how to navigate this world that she's in, right?
Yes, right. Yeah, if you show your kids now John Wayne movies, they're going to end up in jail. Right? It's just the nature of where we are right now. You know, if you say, here's the model for your behavior, act this out, they'll be in jail. It's just because we've continued to redefine and it we have to work with where we are right now. You know, we can't, that's the hard part, is that you have to, because there was no internet in John Wayne's world, for example, right? There was no internet in FDR's world. There was no internet in, that changes everything, right? But I've come around on this. So for a long time, for a few years, I was really depressed by the idea of social media and how awful the effects have been on our society. However, recently I've become aware that yes, it allows stupidity and tyranny and awfulness and corruption and depravity and degeneracy to spread rapidly. However, it also allows the opposition to those tendencies to also communicate and to unite and to respond as a group and not feel isolated and alone, right? So there was no internet during the Russian Revolution. There was no internet during the Maoist Revolution. This is the first time where we've seen a communist attempt at a takeover in the era of the internet, which changes everything, right? Now, I mean, okay, we had Argentina, or we had Venezuela. I take that back. We had Venezuela, but they were not, they weren't developed. They weren't a developed nation they only had one main source of income, and that was oil. So if you control the oil, you control the nation. And they didn't have the internet the way we do. They didn't have social media. But because of social media, it's very difficult for them to give the illusion that they're the majority and that they're in control and that there's no way to resist these things and there's no way to unite and that you're alone and you're crazy. They can't, because it's easier to come together and say, what is going on? What is this? What is happening? Who are these people? And how many of them are there? Well, it turns out there's only it's a very small minority that's using the art of war to appear very large, right? They're using the tactics from the art of war to appear to be a much larger body of people than they really are, and a lot of people have varying levels of participation in that new identity that's trying to take over. But I think that America has a fighting chance of staying alive. But that being said, there will have to be a dramatic transformation that will take place in order to make it feel like more people can participate in the identity. And it's going to have to unify behind a person. Now, that's not to say I don't think that there's a political solution to our problems per se, but you cannot unify people behind an idea. You have to unify people behind a person, because people can't relate to ideas. They have to see it. They have to see a person.
Well,
and it can't be someone who's divisive.
Idealistically, it sounds as though you're talking about revival.
Well, yeah,
right?
yeah.
But I mean, ultimately, because this kind of thing has happened at different levels throughout the history of our country.
Yes.
But then a revival has come along, right? Yeah. Whitefield or Charles Finney or Spurgeon or Moody, these people had an impact in
Billy Graham
revealing Christ to people.
Yeah. Well, I think you're starting to see that. I think people are coming back to the church. At least the church where I go, we have new people coming in every week. Wow. Who say, I want to be part of this. This is beautiful. And a lot of young men, which is like the last group you would expect to want to take on with all of the programming of our current culture, the last thing you would expect is for a young man to want to take on the ascetic discipline of a Christian life, of a traditional Christian life. I'm part of the Orthodox Church, so it's a tall order to want to be part of the Orthodox Church. It's a year or two before you're baptized, and then once you're baptized, there's a lot of daily interaction and daily participation in the identity of the church that you're expected to, that's the ideal. That's what you should want to do if you want to be a part of that. And they're coming in droves. So when you come in and you say, I want to be baptized, there's a process. They say a prayer, and then you become a catechumen, and you're a catechumen for anywhere from 6 months to 2 years before you become baptized, right? Where you're learning the liturgy of the church, you're learning what it means to be Christian, you're learning about the teachings of Christ. We have 25 people who are catechumens right now. Now there's a big batch of them that are going to be baptized on December 18th, but new ones keep coming in every day, every week. We have 1 or 2 or 3 people who just come in, or families, glory to God. So I think you're seeing this.
So you're fairly recent yourself.
Yeah.
And when you talk to the elders that are in the church, is this new move something new, or has this been going on for a long time?
Oh, it's getting exponentially faster. So the funny thing about exponential growth, like if you say the population is growing 1% a year, well, that doesn't sound like much, but what that means is it doubles every 75 years, right? So and it's that last year that really catches you off guard, right? Because in year 74, you go from half, it literally doubles in the next year, right? So I think you're seeing exponential growth. It started as a small body in the 60s, and it's grown now to, it's two full parishes that started from a small body of about, I don't know, like two families and a priest, has now grown to two full parishes, which is, anywhere from 100 to 200 people in each parish in our area. And it's growing every week, and it's growing faster because the word is spreading, and the internet is helping that too, right? Most of the people who come there learn about Orthodoxy or are first introduced to Orthodoxy through YouTube.
Well, I certainly never knew anything about it until I got involved in all this Jordan Peterson stuff,
Yeah. America, it's like it's very unfamiliar to America. Most Americans have, because of our Calvinist beginnings, most Americans have a Calvinist view of Christianity, which is only in response to Catholicism, and has no awareness or interaction with Orthodox Christianity. And because of that, it's just largely not a part of our mind space. I mean, most of the people who came here, the formers and founders, were either deists or they were Calvinists. A lot of the early groups that came to America to form a utopia were Calvinists of one sort or another. So, and that really informs our view of religion. And like I said, because of that, Orthodoxy is kind of a blind spot.
Well, I think we have I just want to tell everybody, we have a video of Jeremy's story of how he got interested in Orthodoxy in the first place. So I'll post that underneath here.
Yeah, and I didn't mean to go off on that. I'm excited by, so my hope is being renewed. That's what I was trying to say. My hope is being renewed because
absolutely,
we are seeing the power of social media to undermine the attempts at tyranny that we see from the authoritarians that have taken over. There is an attempt at totalitarianism, and what form that takes is different depending on who you talk to, right? To me, it looks
right.
like
I mean, there's an impulse of that coming from the left, and there's an impulse of it coming from the right.
Correct. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. And the thing that I have found most interesting in a lot of the conversations that I have is that in this space between, there's a lot of different options.
Yes.
One of the options in the space between is compromise, but compromise in essence, it really doesn't accomplish much.
Right.
Right. Because if truth lies somewhere along this line, wherever it is, okay, whether you believe that truth is on the left or truth is on the right, if the truth is somewhere on that line and I come down on the middle, then I'm forsaking the truth and I'm allowing a lot of untruth to get mixed up with it. And that's how I end up in this compromise position. Another place that's in the middle is there's so many threads here. There's a lot of places you can fall off the edge. If there's a knife edge that walks down the line between two things, there's a lot of pots you can fall off onto either on the left or the right that are just very close to the middle.
Yes.
A lot of things in postmodernism, a lot of just a lot of weird cultish kind of things that a person can get involved in that all come out of staying away from both sides. Because if you're staying away from both sides out of fear of, I haven't thought this through very much, but I just know that this middle space is rife with a lot of, I guess that's why Jordan Peterson always says when you're on the edge between order and chaos, that's where all the potential resides, but that's also where all the danger resides, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Right. I would couch that in that we have this middle, but how do I say this? I think we have to find a way. So I think this is really the project that Jonathan Pajot has been working on, and it's the idea of reviving the concept of universal history, right? So universal history, the whole project of humanity for thousands of years was to tie the history of their ethnic group to the larger narrative in the Bible. And that the narrative in the Bible was the story of history. And it continued on after the Bible was written, where, you know, you have, like, I read, and it became the Roman Empire, you know, how people participated in the history of the Roman Empire. And you have a lot of people who say, well, that doesn't include my people. And that's what's starting to fall apart. So what we have to do is we have to come up with a larger universal history, a universal narrative that people can accept, feel that they're a part of, and also feel that they can make a meaningful contribution to that universal story. Their individual story can participate in a larger story. And that's what's missing, right? Science can't provide that. That was the promise of science. The promise of science when I was a kid was futurism, which was that you would just have more leisure time. Well, that hasn't happened, right?
Well, I mean, that's
the
whole dream of the universal basic income is that idea, though.
Correct. But I think it's just another utopia.
Well,
because
and the problem there is there's no meaning. If you don't, you might just have all this leisure time, but you have no meaning because you're not accomplishing, and all the meaning comes out of movement towards a goal.
And the struggle that comes with that, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's part of the problem too, is that in our modernism, we've been told that struggle is evil. Struggle is oppression. If it's difficult, it's oppressive, which is wrong, and avoid that, right? That's why divorce rates are insane right now, because people have said, oh, you deserve so much more. You shouldn't deserve this. You don't deserve this. You don't deserve to be treated this way. You should be able, you know, he shouldn't make you feel this way. She shouldn't try to do that to you. She shouldn't try to control you. And it's because people don't understand, they don't have a higher vision that unifies them and that defines their struggle and that gives meaning to their struggle and that contextualizes their struggle, because they think the whole concept of struggle is oppression. That's to me, that's what has to be fixed. You have to give people, here's a reason for suffering that makes your suffering meaningful, so that you can rise above your suffering and sacrifice yourself for a larger purpose. Right. That's been lost.
Yeah. When I first started listening to Jordan Peterson, and he always says life is suffering. And I even commented on this in the past. Well, he, you know, yes, there is suffering in life, but he's not right when he equates life and suffering, you know?
Right.
And so I used to argue against it a lot, but the more I think about it, and the more conversations I've had about it, this whole space of suffering is just a very, very important space that has, up until Jordan Peterson showed up, has only been approached, at least in recent decades, in a kind of saccharine way by some people in the church. You know, the cliche, I mean, they use the verse as a cliche, pick up your cross and carry it.
Right.
And
take up your cross and follow me.
Or you know, you have to bear your burdens, and people outside the church look at that and they laugh at it because they think, look at these saps, you know, waiting for pie in the sky by and by, because they don't understand the heroic, beautiful, powerful role that suffering plays in the individual life,
right,
to craft us and
the way you transcend your identity is to sacrifice it for a higher identity. And people don't understand that. That's been completely lost on modernism, right? So the way you transcend your suffering is to sacrifice yourself for a higher identity. And that can be, you know, as a father, you mentioned this too in another of your videos, where there was a guy who felt like he had to be authoritarian to his daughter. And then once he realized there's another way for me to be an authority, and it is by love and protection, like sacrificing himself for to pass on the identity of being a father and the family name, to allow her to grow up in this space that
Mhm.
basically has an umbrella over it,
Mhm.
is how he transcended his own obsession or his own rumination over his own suffering,
Mhm.
right? And he no longer felt like a tyrant anymore, and he no longer, and then he had a relationship with his daughter because he was sacrificing himself for her, right?
Mhm.
Well, the same, that is fractal. That's a fractal truth that goes all the way up to, it should go up to the president of the United States. The president should be the greatest servant. They should be going around washing feet of people and helping and charity work and reintegrating those who are, this is something I ran into the Old Testament the other day. My wife and I are reading the Bible together. There's a Bible in a Year program that we're following. And I noticed in there, it said the justice of God will be played out on the widows and the poor. And so we think of justice, we think of vengeance. But
Mhm.
that's not how it was used in the Old Testament. That was not, the justice of God was not God's vengeance. The justice of God was easing the suffering of those who have been thrown out of the system, people who have not been, who are on the edges, on the borders of the system, who can't
Mhm.
participate.
Mhm.
And they've been reintegrated. That's the justice, right? In the Orthodoxy, it said that there was a saint who said that the poor are made for the rich and the rich are made for the poor, right? We transcend, there's nothing wrong, there's nothing inherently evil, or it's not an indication of your spiritual attainment, whether you're rich or whether you're poor. Like, being rich is not as a result of being blessed by God for your righteousness. Being poor is not a result of your curse for being unrighteous. We saw this, you see this starting to play out right at the beginning of the New Testament, where, have Elizabeth, who's been serving God uprightly, wasn't allowed to have, like, she was barren. Well,
Mhm.
it's shown right there. It was not because she was unrighteous. There's other reasons, right?
Mhm.
The healing started there with her, where John came in, and those patterns start to be repaired and fixed. But anyway,
Well, and I'm just
go
have
ahead.
to enter in here.
Yeah, no, please,
And
please.
that's an issue of timing, right?
Yeah,
It
right,
wasn't that she was barren forever, but she was barren until the right time.
right. But in her
I,
culture, she was perceived as being unrighteous
sure, absolutely,
because she was
absolutely.
barren, right? So what I'm
And
trying to say is God transcends that and reintegrates those who have been not included, and he gives the rich the opportunity to transcend their own identity and become part of the body of Christ by sacrificing what they have for those who do not have, and those who are on the outside can be reintegrated into the body of Christ by being provided for by those who have.
well,
That's what makes Christianity the answer to our culture.
and the other side of God's justice, I guess, I guess maybe the word is justice, but just the way reality works is that he also gives the rich opportunities to fall.
Yes.
And there's this constant motion where people are rich for a generation or two generations, and then they lose everything, and then they start, maybe the next generation of that family starts at the bottom, and then there's
Yeah.
people that start at the bottom and they move
Yeah.
up, they move through the system.
Yep.
And so this whole thing is constantly moving. So there's constantly this opportunity to sacrifice and support and help and strive, because
Yes.
it's in that striving that we learn and grow and strengthen. I want to get this in here too before I forget, that I was talking about the left and the right and how the center has all these problems, so you can't meet in the center with compromise,
No.
because, and then you reminded me, it's a matter of transcending above that and getting the higher view, right? When you
Yes.
come up here with the meta view and you look down at this thing of the left and the right, this is one of the gifts that Jordan Peterson has given us, is to say, look, there's all this good over here on the left, and there's all this good over here on the right.
Mhm.
And the problem is that they have to learn to acknowledge the good that's in both sides, and support and encourage one another in bringing out these best things so that we can have the best marriage. It's like marriage is like that. You have these two people that are completely different,
Mm-hmm.
and they, over time, it takes a long time to learn this other person is completely different than me. That doesn't mean they're wrong or bad,
Mm-hmm.
but it means that they have something to offer me, and I'm completely different from them, and I have something to offer them.
Yes.
And then McGilchrist talks about the two sides of our brain. And I know he argues a lot that it's not a male and a female hemisphere, but even if it's not male and female, it still seems to me like it's a marriage, that these two hemispheres of the brain have to function together like a marriage functions.
Yes.
Because this marriage metaphor works all the way through everything, including Christ and the church and all
It's
these things,
fractal. It's a fractal
right?
truth. Yes. Yeah.
And
Yeah. So if anybody doesn't know,
one
real
more,
quick.
let
Oh,
me
sorry. Go
wind
ahead.
this
Go.
up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Go.
You know,
Go.
you're
Sorry.
talking about identity, like in the basketball team identity, and
Yeah.
you have the authority and the identity. And one of the things Jonathan said the other day that made so much sense to me, it took me a while to wrap my head around it, is that identity is communion,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
so this transcended view of the space of possibility, that is identity, that holds things together. It's that transcended view that holds things together. And that identity is where the communion takes place. And that's what we've lost in our country, is communion, right?
Yes.
Community on the local level, community in our urban areas, in our cities, in our communities, communion in the church, in the evangelical church. In recent years, they've tried to institute these life groups so that there are smaller groups meeting together and building community, faith communities. But that the answer has to be in that lived communion, right?
Yep.
And it not only communion with each other, but our communion with Christ.
Right.
So that's what brings the identity back together.
Yes.
But I'm curious, when you said that you feel that for the nation to come back together, there has to be a person,
yes,
that represents that identity as a nation. And how would you see that working out? Are you thinking that if we just elect the right president, things are going to get better? I mean,
well, I
don't
think
see that
that's too
happening
simplistic.
based on our
No,
elections.
I think that's too simplistic. As a part of that would come a new system of governance, right? So to me, it's not going to be if we get a top-down solution, it's going to be tyrannical and it's not going to be pretty.
Mhm.
Whatever side it comes from, if it comes from the left or from the right, it's going to be an authoritarian tyrant who says enough. That would be less ideal, in my opinion. What would be more ideal?
Understatement of the generation.
Right. And I think this is the work that Jordan Peterson's working on, and that all of us in this space are moving toward, which is that if we rely on a political solution for this, it's not going to be pretty and there's going to be a lot of suffering. Instead, if we take responsibility in our own hearts to heal, repent, find a way to participate in the Christian identity, and then to live that out as best we can by transcending our own identity through sacrifice, that's going to start playing out. And then participating in our communities, like you said, right? If we start participating more in our community and in this process, this will have a healing effect. And I think it can be quite rapid. And if you have instead a healing effect, you can cleanse from the bottom up rather than having the tyrant come from the top down and try to clean house and determine who gets in and who's out, and become the judge, right? That's what everyone's afraid of, because no one trusts that anymore. People don't trust authority. It's been revealed to us that authority can be tyrannical and corrupt, and so the call is to us as individuals to heal our own hearts and clean our own room. I mean, this goes to Jordan Peterson's, his catchphrase on the internet is "clean your room," and I agree with that. I think that's that is the best solution. That is the most ideal solution. It takes time. It takes time to, but it took time for us to get to this situation. So it's going to take time to get out.
It's a two-part solution, right? It's all of that, the individual cleaning their room and in everything that means, because that means a lot more than just tidying up your space, because
although that is part of it.
Yes.
But yeah.
But one of the things that was explained to me one time about the whole entropy thing is that when you clean your room, it's not as though you're decreasing entropy just because your room is getting tidier. That and here's one place where entropy, there's both good and bad sides of an increase in entropy, because as you clean your room, the entropy is offloaded, because just one simple aspect of it would be, as you're cleaning your room, you're emitting energy, you're emitting heat, right? Because you're working, and that work is emitting heat, and so that heat is going out into the universe as increasing entropy. But the other thing that's happening as you're cleaning your room that I've thought about a lot is that you're learning things about yourself and how you think about the world, and you're absorbing information about how organization works and what the purposes are. And you have to think about what kind of person you are and what you want to accomplish, and what all of the meaning is going to be of all these things that you're doing, and how that's going to affect your future. And so your information is growing.
Yes.
While you're cleaning this room. So there's a lot more happening than just getting the room tidy and messing it up again, and getting it tidy and messing it up again. There's a learning going on, and there's an increase in information, and that increase in information is what brings transformation at the individual and at the community level. And so I was saying there's two parts to this. That's one part. The second part is what Jordan Peterson's three parts. Tell the truth, at least don't lie, which is way harder than it sounds.
Yes.
And transcend or abandon ideology. And I was so surprised the other day, because Jordan Peterson sends out this Monday newsletter. I don't know if you get it. You can sign up for it, where he talks about the things he's going to be doing during the week in terms of what his focus is. And he'll always include a few little things that you can put on Twitter, or things that have a little meme box around them you can post on Facebook. And one of them was abandon ideology. And so that one was going around on Facebook for a little while from the people that I follow. And some people were jumping on there and saying, what is he talking about? That's the stupidest thing I ever heard. If we abandon ideology, then we lose all of our foundation and all of our foundational beliefs. And they were completely misunderstanding him, thinking that abandon ideology means give up your, if you live within a beautiful structured conservatism or a beautiful structured liberalism, whatever your structure is, that abandon ideology means you just throw that out the window and have nothing, because they didn't understand that ideology is what he's really talking about, is when you get trapped in that totalizing system, so that you're almost completely addicted by what you believe and you can't see anything outside of it. Right.
Yes. Yeah. I see this. So I float in more of the conservative circles generally, and I see this blindness in, wow, these people are so stupid. Like, look how dumb they are, that they're making these decisions that cause these horrible results. They're so dumb. And it's like, what if they're really smart and very capable of achieving what they want to achieve, but what they want to achieve is very different than what you think that the leader of the country should achieve, right? Like, what if they're very skilled at achieving what they want by undermining the current system, by doing what they're doing. Like they don't even explore that possibility, right? Like,
Well,
no,
and
it's
that's
just they're
only one
dumb.
of a that's only one of a dozen possibilities that I can think of.
Oh
Right?
yeah, of course.
Either
Right.
they're very
Right.
dumb or they're very smart or there's something else entirely going on, right? And
Yeah.
they're,
And they have no effect on it whatsoever. It's just something else
yeah.
that's happening. Yeah, exactly. Right. Right. I totally agree with you. And it is, some of that is definition as well. Like people don't understand what ideology means. They don't know that, like, I like how Jordan framed it, where he said ideology is basically like propaganda, where you focus on the things that agree with the way you see the world and you completely ignore the things that don't. And you only share the things that agree with your viewpoint without addressing any of the concerns or challenges or contradictions, right? That's ideology. And that has served well for me to help understand, a better way, a healthier way of thinking, right? You
Well,
should
and
constantly be trying to attack your own ideas, right? Like you should constantly be tearing them down and saying, no, this, what about from this point of view? Does it hold up? I mean, Jordan Peterson talks about that all the time too, how he does that.
well, the human tendency to fall into that pit, though, has been used to great effect by Facebook, Google,
Yeah.
Netflix, blah, blah, blah,
Right.
where
Right.
they completely take advantage of our tendency as human beings to do that. And so now they only, whatever algorithm you get stuck on, they only feed you that stuff,
Well,
So,
because they've optimized for attention.
mhm.
So they want to keep your attention as much as possible. They don't care how they do that. They don't care. There's no ethical choice as to how do you keep your attention for them,
Yeah.
right? They've transcended that. For them, attention equals money. So they've optimized for attention. Well, how do they do that? The same way they do if you go to Vegas. What happens if you go to Vegas? You put in some money, you've got promise, you've got hope, you pull the ring, you pull the thing, you pull the thing, you pull the handle, you push the button, you ask for another card. You've got this hope. Most of the time you're disappointed. Most of the time you lose. Most of the time on social media, you're slightly agitated. Then you get this brief moment of, oh, surprise, neat. Oh, anomaly, to tie it to our earlier conversation. Oh, it's an anomaly. I won. Yay. Depression, frustration, frustration. Oh, fun. That's what they do. They feed you news. Most of the news is agitating to you, right? If you look at your timeline, most of the things that are being shared with you are slightly agitating. And you go, this isn't right. This isn't good. I don't like this. What's happening? Who's in control? Oh, relief. Here's somebody I agree with, right? It's the same
Or
game.
here's a
It's
kitty, here's a
Vegas.
puppy.
Yeah, they just use, all they're using short snippets the same way that Vegas uses the slot machine or the cards. It's just to hold your attention, because the longer they have your attention, the more money they make. That's it.
The other day, I can't remember which video it was. I think it might have been Jordan Peterson and might have been in his conversation with Jonathan Pajot on the one that he posted of Jonathan's vision of how the world works.
Mm-hmm. Which I love.
And
That's he's done a better job of boiling down his worldview in that video than any other video that I've seen of his.
yeah,
It's very good.
It really challenged me, because the last time I tried to boil down what's inside my head, it was a 3-hour lecture and it didn't go down well. So
yeah, it's hard.
I need to rein it in. But but the thing that he said was, and what he was basically doing was boiling down, maybe this is his own thought, but it sounded like he was boiling down McGilchrist's concept of the two hemispheres. But the way Peterson put it was, your attention is what captures what you give to your rationality.
Mm-hmm.
So your rationality has nothing else to work on but what your attention has offered to it.
Yes.
So if your attention is captured by stuff that is completely biased one way or another, your rationality doesn't have anything else to work with, because your right hemisphere is what gathers knowledge, gathers information, gathers opportunity, and hands it over to your left hemisphere And that rationality can only work on that. It's got nothing else to work on. So
Right.
if people are behaving what you call irrational, it's because their attention is gathering the wrong material, right?
Well, I'm going to take issue with your use of right and wrong there. We frequently act irrationally, and it's not always wrong. If you acted rationally, sometimes you would be a very cruel person, or you could be a cruel person.
I know that comes up a lot in evolutionary theory. So yeah, I know what you're saying.
Yeah, I'm just saying, rationality good, irrationality bad, I think is a broken model. I think that's the modernist model, and I don't think it's correct. But anyway, that's just that's a separate issue. But I hear what you're saying. It is
if
the
you
gather
connect
and
the two, though, if you let's forget irrationality. Let's just say your rationality is only as effective for you as what you can gather and is what your attention is gathering. So if you're focusing your attention in places that are not productive, one way or another, and productive doesn't necessarily mean financially productive or
right.
Economically productive. Productive can be artistic.
Mm-hmm.
If you're focusing your attention on artistic things and you're bringing in something of beauty and meaning and truth, then the rationality has something else to work on. So
yes,
if your attentional focus is in a non-meaningful direction, then there's no way that your rationality has any meaning to work on.
right.
And
right.
I think that's what's been happening, is that
yes,
people have a loss of meaning because their attentional focus is in something that has no intrinsic meaning to it.
I think it's because I would phrase it a little differently personally. I would say it's because they put attention on things that are distractions from their stated purpose. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going back to the demon analogy of I have a purpose. I want to win the championship of the basketball team. Anything that draws my attention that's not leading me to that purpose could be considered a distraction.
Mm-hmm.
And you can even take that, but you can take that obsessively too, where you go, oh, if I didn't sleep, I could practice more. Mm-hmm. and also fall off of that wagon, right? Like that's where you're talking about with balance becomes very important, right? Like you have to balance, but you have to work within the current system that you live in. You can't be an idealistic robot that can work out 24 hours a day. You have to work within the constraints, but you're trying to optimize for those constraints. Like you can't completely ignore your schoolwork, because if your grades are too low, you can't participate. Right. So it's like you only do just enough homework to get C's so that you can participate in the team, because your main goal is to win the state championship. And that anything that's not bringing you toward that could be viewed as a distraction that's drawing your attention away, that's pulling your limited rational resources away from achieving the purpose that you've stated for yourself. You have problems. There are people like me who have a problem where you can't stick to any stated purpose long enough to accomplish anything significant, right? Which is another problem. It's like constant distraction.
Well, I think
because I constantly find new things interesting that pull me away from my current stated purpose.
It's not only that, and I have the same problem. I get very distracted all the time, but it's not only that, it's that it's easy to convince yourself, well, yes, winning the state championship is a great goal and I want to participate towards that. But if I want to do academically well, that's going to hinder my time and energy to participate towards that goal. So maybe there's something that's not the best about participating towards that goal of the state championship. So then you have to start making choices of which is the best stated goal to go towards. And then a person can get completely lost because you get boundaryless, where there's this and there's this and there's this. And so at some point, a person just has to commit, I guess.
Yes, that's
to
correct.
a
Yeah.
stated goal. And I
Right.
guess this is why
Right.
Jordan Peterson always says, you can't just look at any one stated goal as your point of meaning. Like I want to
Yes.
graduate from college, because once you've graduated, then your life falls apart. You have no more boundaries, right?
Right.
And
Yep.
what are you going to do now? Then you're in this field of infinite potential again. So
Right.
that's why your stated goal has to be looking to the highest possible good,
Yeah.
and letting yourself be a person who's willing to sacrifice the present for that future goal. And that has to be part of what's driving you in every area of life.
Yeah.
Which also will lead you maybe to the appropriately smaller stated goals that you need to be working on.
Right. That's
Bring
the
things
idea.
into your salience landscape, right?
Yep. 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 And that ties into what I was going to say when you were talking about cleaning your room and you were talking about information and entropy. I was going to frame it a little differently and say, as you put your room together, you are a judge and you are deciding, this is in the room, this is not in the room. This is allowed to stay, this has a purpose, this doesn't.
Yeah.
So now I have to define what the purpose of the room is. Well, defining the purpose of the room ties into my identity as well, because I'm going to participate in that room and use it and use the things that are in there and not include the things that I don't want to be part of that participation, right? I want to remove distractions. So it all maps right back into, learning to clean your room is, like you said, a small exercise in learning to define who you are and define your identity. Because as soon as you start defining identity, you have to, like Jonathan Peugeot talked about this. As soon as you have an identity, there's a judge. The judge shows up and says, okay, this is part of the identity. This is not part of the identity. And the problem with our culture right now is that we've associated that judge with tyranny. The only way we frame the judge is as tyrannical. And that's not how reality works, right? You can't include everything in your room. It won't fit. Right? There are physical constraints to including everything. I can't bring all homeless people to my home. There's not physical room. And if I could, I couldn't feed them, right? So that's the framework we have to live in. We have to understand that there is an included and excluded. And the goal is to try to include as many as possible without disrupting the identity.
Well, I think one of the goals too is having enough of these potential communities, rather than calling them all identities. Let's say identity / community, because if you have enough of these potential communities, then you have enough potential hierarchies so that everyone can participate successfully in some of those hierarchies.
Yes.
And be included in them and feel okay about not being included in others.
Yes.
So one of the examples that Jonathan used that I thought was just so clear is if you have a knitting group and this is something that's happening now with a lot of the young women, because they want to go back to some of the more traditional crafts. And so a lot of young women are learning to knit. And my daughter has just learned to knit all these beautiful, way beyond anything I ever could have imagined making. There's just, you can go so far in a craft like that. But you have a knitting group and you have a stated purpose. You get together and you're knitting and you each have a project. And you're trying to finish your projects. And maybe you're going to have an art show at the end of it or something. And then somebody comes in and says, well, I really like your group. You have great people, but I'm a pianist and I don't know how to knit, but I would love to come in and just play piano. And so they let this person come in and play piano. And pretty soon somebody comes in and, well, maybe they'd like to play basketball, but they want to hang out with these same people.
Yeah.
And so if you start including everybody, pretty soon you're not a knitting group anymore. So you've completely lost your identity. You have some kind of community, but it has no boundary. And so how do you identify who you are as a community anymore? And eventually it just disbands.
Right.
And so then there is an opportunity lost for community for some kind of people who would only fit into a knitting community and would only have opportunities for advancement in a knitting. they have opportunities for advancement in a knitting community, but they're never going to play for the NBA.
Right.
So why tear down the whole NBA because it doesn't include everybody? Why not provide other opportunities for everybody to be included at some point, right?
Yes. Who wants to
And
participate?
so
Yeah.
I think this business of building more communities and building more clubs and having more of these opportunities on our social level is also a part of fixing things.
Couldn't agree more. You see that because all the old social clubs from the 50s and 60s are all virtually dead now. Elks
Mhm.
Lodge, Eagles Lodge, Junior Chamber of Commerce, all those things that used to be the civic participation groups that people got involved
Mhm.
with they're all basically gone. And churches too. Church used to play that role for a lot of people. That was their main community, their main social interaction. That's virtually gone. Because we've abstracted and tried to replace it with the internet. And now we're finding, as much as I enjoy sitting and talking with you on Zoom, it is definitely not the same as sitting in the same room with you and meeting you. We've never met in person.
I know. I've been
And so
thinking
we
about
have a
how much fun
low,
it would be to open up my house and have some kind of a conference here.
like a
I,
symposium. That would be cool.
yeah, I could probably manage meetings we could probably have at least small group meetings totaling about 30 people if there were that many people who would be interested in coming, but we'd
Yeah.
have to figure out something about housing,
Right. Sleeping. Yeah.
find
Yeah.
some motels nearby or hotels or something.
Right.
But just before I said that, you said something that made me think about something that was very important, and then I lost it.
I'm sorry.
No, because I'm the one who I tripped myself up here.
Oh.
I went off on this rabbit trail. Oh, about meeting people in person and community and well, I guess it'll come back to me.
Yeah. Well, and that's one thing I really enjoy about going to church each week. We have a growing body of people that come there, but you come, there is a judge who judges who can be there and who not. That's the priest in our organization. If you aren't willing to accept certain basic principles or participate in a predictable way to that body, you can't be part of that body. So the people who are there have agreed to certain particular ways of interacting with each other and interacting in the space and participating. So you go there, you're standing, and we stand in the Orthodox Church, and you're all looking in the same direction. And Orthodox Church is very liturgical. So most of the service is repeated each week in essentially the same form, and it's the same order of events. The same things happen each week, and there's a very short homily. It's about 10 or 15 minutes long in the middle where the priest shares a message for the week. But most of it is a participative worship of Christ, where everyone's standing together looking in the same direction. And the healing effects of standing in a space together, surrounded by the icons of the saints, looking at the altar of Christ, being led in worship by a priest, standing together as a body, it affects you on so many levels that you're just completely unaware of. But the healing effect of that has been unimaginably powerful in my life and the life of my family. And there is a love there that permeates, and then you bring it home with you and you want to continue to participate in that, and then you want to make your home a miniature church where it's the same level of participation but on a smaller scale, where it becomes fractal. And that is the healing power of a community where you are participating together in something. And people try to relive that. They're trying to recreate that. That's what movies are. That's what, the like fan fiction, or where people get together and cosplay, where they all dress up in costumes as their favorite characters and go and reenact scenes from their favorite book. That's People are trying to recreate Christianity. But it's there. The pattern is there because it's a cosmic pattern. It's the pattern of how humans participate in the world, and we want to do that. And I think that's the call that Christianity can offer, is to say there is a structure to this that has been around. This is how the universe works. Come be a part of it. Come join the body of Christ. Come participate. Come eat and commune with us. And you'll be healed. Your identity, you can transcend your identity, and you can help your family transcend their identity together in the body of Christ. It's just very beautiful. And I didn't have a framework for understanding it because of my modernism and scientism. But the effects are real. You can't deny it, The fact that I'm married still, it's a sign that there's something bigger going on, glory to God. So
that's certainly true in my marriage too. I mean, we're going on 30 years here soon, and it's
congratulations. I just did my 19th year, so
completely because of Christ. There's nothing else that would have held us together through the tough times. So
right.
So maybe that's a good place to stop for today.
That sounds good. We've covered a lot of ground
here from Entropy.
I know we've covered a lot of ground. We've gone all over the place. Yeah. Both of our ADD tendencies have come out, and we've whatever popped up in the salience field, we've
this
pursued.
Is great, but we never did get to the chaos and complexity theory that you wanted to talk about. So maybe that's for another day.
Yeah, it's related. It's related to the idea that but just the irreducibility of chaos theory and of complexity really undermines a lot of scientism and materialism, and it's what makes me interested in participating, because basically if I believed in scientism, I would feel hopeless. I would feel nihilistic. And because I believe in the irreducibility, and because I've seen evidence of irreducibility all around me, it makes me feel like I can have an impact. It's good, because you can affect the whole world just by subtle changes. Like if that's what chaos theory says. If the whole butterfly effect idea, I believe that. I agree with that. I think you can start healing. I heard a Buddhist monk say that one time. He said, if you want to heal the world, wash your dishes, right? Like if you want to fix the world, if you want to fix what's wrong in Africa, do the dishes every day. And it has an effect. It bleeds out. The world is not as cause and effect as we like to believe it is, right? It's very difficult to start unparsing all that stuff. And we have an effect on the environment around us more than we think we do.
Well, that's why I like Wolfram's perspective. He uses language idiosyncratically. So when he says computational irreducibility and computational reducibility, he's using it according to his own framework. But that's what he means, just what you said, that most of the world is computationally irreducible, which completely puts to bed the idea of determinism.
Yes.
So So anyway, that would be a great conversation for another time.
Another time. This has been a real pleasure. Thanks for your patience. It's really been fun to meander down these paths with you and talk about it.
I love the way your mind works.
Well, thank you. I feel the same. You bring a fresh instinctual approach to these concepts that really helps keep the conversation moving and keeps it alive. Because it's easy to get caught up in the technicalities of language. And I think your intuitional approach to these subjects is really, like I said, bringing a life to the conversation and bringing a freshness and a constant reevaluation and continuing to force us to integrate more disparate concepts into the whole conversation. So I think you're making a very valuable contribution, and I really enjoy talking with you.
I really appreciate that, Jeremy. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah.
You're welcome. Oh, real quick before we go, no, I want to make one plug. So the other thing I wanted to tie in I'm sorry, I just remembered this, but I feel like it's really important. So a lot of the concepts that Stephen Wolfram is talking about, and a
Mhm.
lot of these concepts have actually been dealt with by the church fathers, and probably the biggest one. Now, this is a deep dive. I'm going to throw a name
I
out
had
there.
I had a feeling it tied into all this stuff. See?
It ties into Saint Maximus the Confessor and his idea of essence and being, and his idea of logos and logoi. So we can talk about it another time. And I am not anywhere close to being a professor now.
I would love to do that.
But I would recommend to you to look into those concepts. So Saint Maximus the Confessor and him talking about logos and logoi feeds into this conversation and really gives a framework for Stephen Wolfram. Like if Stephen Wolfram knew about St. Maximus, he would probably make a lot more progress more rapidly, because this stuff was already worked out by St. Maximus 1,000 years
Okay,
ago.
well, if you happen to listen to the Wolfram video that I highlighted, and part of that sticks out to you as being particularly pertinent, if you would timestamp it, then we could
Yep.
use that specifically for our conversation, and then you could elaborate on what you see there.
Okay.
But
I will
also look into it. And I don't know if you got a chance to see the Four Horsemen of Meaning video.
I haven't watched that one yet.
They jump in and they start talking about some of those things, emanations and essences and
yes,
and all of that. And I
yep.
keep wanting to say, you guys, you got to talk to Stephen Wolfram. But I think the problem is, and I noticed this with a lot of their conversations, that Jordan Peterson knows his own work.
Yes.
And John Vervaeke knows his own work, and Wolfram knows his own work. And when they talk to each other, if they don't have enough time to really dig in and ask each other questions about this, then each of them is only representing their own work, and they don't always know where the connections are. But
yes.
Because we've been watching all of them, we see the connections. And so
yes.
I feel like they need a translator or something working.
Yeah, well, the shared language is a problem. They're all using domain-specific languages, right?
Yes.
You have Jonathan using Orthodox language, and traditional language. You have John Vervaeke using neuroscience. You have Jordan Peterson using neuropsychology, and you have Stephen Wolfram using mathematics and physics. And they're talking about the same things, but they're using different language to explain what they're talking about. And so it makes it very difficult to parse. I agree with you totally. It's
one of the things that really helped me was all the hours that I've spent with Glenn, the physicist on here, because he began to show me how some of that language fits into that frame. And I was just re-listening to episode 5 in the Physics of Life series. And I was actually going to do some clips here, but I could do that when we do the next conversation.
That would be fun.
Some of those clips, because he explains how some of that language is used, and really opens up what Wolfram is talking about.
Yeah, I think St. Maximus does the same with the essence, and St. Gregory of Palamas as well, where he talks about the essence and energies of God. The essence and that ties into being and person. Like all of that is wrapped together. But I think all of that is related, right? Especially essence and energies of God. I really heard that with Wolfram and Lex, where they were trying to parse out, well, we participate in it, so we can't get outside of it. The way the Christians would frame that would be, or the Orthodox Christians would frame that would be, the essence of God is outside time and space and completely unknowable, because we're created beings and God is an uncreated being. And so he knows all potentials, but the potentials that he actually actualizes into our awareness are his energies or his activities, right? So they're both part of God, but they're distinct, because the essence of God is outside time and space, whereas the way he interacts with us is through his essence, or through his energies or his activities. And that's how he particularizes his patterns of creation into time and space. So anyway, there's a framework there in Christianity to understand what they're talking about.
this whole thing kind of fits into what my project actually is, which the way I see it is, I think there's a marriage of science and faith that most people can't see.
Mhm.
People of faith are often afraid of science because they're
Mhm.
afraid they might learn something that will affect their faith negatively. And
Right.
people of science are afraid of faith because they don't want their trajectory to be influenced by something that is not logical.
Mhm.
But when you see science through a lens of faith, you see all sorts of deep truths that are underlying all of these structures that
Yes.
they can't see.
Yes.
And
Correct.
because of my art background, I see all these deep structures and I want some way to communicate that with people. So part of
Yes.
what I've been doing is trying to develop a language. I mean, Jonathan has this great language now, but I just heard him the other day say it took him 20 years to develop that. So
Mhm.
I've got a long ways to go before I can do a half-hour video. So anyway, this has been great. I got to go because I got somebody
Yes.
else on at
I
11
understand.
and I got to get
Okay.
ready for it. So,
Sounds great. Thank
okay.
you very much for your time.
Okay.
It's been a real
Yeah.
pleasure. All right.
Bye-bye.
See ya. Bye.